Eze Eluchie is a lawyer and public affairs analyst. He joins us now to discuss the presidential chat. Eze, thank you so much for giving us your time on such short notice. Let's begin with his stance. I mean, we're talking about the cost of governance and how to bring that down, but the president has categorically stated tonight that he has no plans to reduce his cabinet. What do you make of his explanation for maintaining the size of his cabinet, despite calls for a leaner one?
Well, I think it's just a continuation of that his Emilio Constant, that I don't give a damn what you people think about it. You have to accept what I want, and that is the end of it. And that's the very most unfortunate stance in a democracy. Because clearly, one of the problems, one of the banes of our developmental aspirations is the cost of governance. And in the process rather than even bring down the cost of governance, Mr. Bola Tinubu has gone to add new ministries, new parastatals, so many media SAs, so many assistants, raising the cost of governance. And while raising the cost of governance, he tells Nigerians to tighten their belts. This does not make sense. The purpose of a leader is to lead by example, because what he's just doing is telling us he is a ruler, not a leader. Because a leader will start and set the example for the population, for the people to follow. But in this case, he's telling us he does not give a damn what we think about cost of governance. All over the world, even in the incoming American administration, if you recollect, Elon Musk is charged with reducing the cost of governance. So why the president of Nigeria has said point blank.
Okay, we apologize for that glitch. Eze, if you can still hear me, I'll just go ahead and say I wanted you to contextualize his, because he said it in context. He didn't just say, I'm not reducing my cabinet. His explanation, I'm not holding brief for him, but he did say that if you consider the size of Nigeria, that the size, every single person in his cabinet is necessary. Even when the journalist asked him, does he agree that everyone is important? I'm just paraphrasing now. He insists that every member of his cabinet is necessary. So in that frame, I want you to speak on his response and his reason for maintaining a large cabinet.
Well, it only shows that he has no idea what governance is all about. If we are 200 million Nigerians, must you have 200 million people in your cabinet? The American government is the American population is higher than that of Nigeria by almost 50%. And they have less than 10 cabinet ministers. So the excuse he's giving is preposterous, it's ridiculous. It only goes to project that Mr. Bola Tinubu has no idea what he's there to do as Mr. President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You don't have to have 200 million people in your cabinet. You can still have, okay, the constitution says you must have one minister from each state. So at the very most, you cannot have more than 30, you should not have more than 36 or 37, including Abuja. So for him to use that excuse that we have 200 million Nigerians is in fact, it's ludicrous, and it should be ashamed of that response he gave at that media chat.
Let's talk about his stance on the tax reform bill. I mean, most people will say that the House has said they are going to take a look at it, maybe taking some of the comments and the concerns that has been raised, but he seems to hold the position that the tax reform bill has come to stay. His countenance did not embrace any sort of consideration for the concerns that are being raised. I don't know what you think about that.
Now, that will be a litmus test to know whether we have a democracy or not. Because you cannot just sit down in Aso Rock and say it must be that way. It doesn't work that way in a democracy. If the National Assembly says no, it is no. So for goodness sake, when one looks at Mr. Bola Tinubu's antecedents from Lagos, those who know his role as the governor of Lagos know the role of Alpha Beta, which is reportedly linked to him, and all the tax reforms. So such a man who set that example of Alpha Beta in Lagos cannot be allowed to pocket Nigeria in the same way. Listen to the voice of Nigerians, listen to the views of Nigerians. You cannot just say, okay, everything must be based on a place of consumption, which is what the basics of the tax reforms is all about. That the VAT should be paid based on, should be allocated based on place of consumption. For goodness sake, what happens to the place of origin of the wealth of Nigeria? to the Niger Delta area, to the oil producing mineral areas, which are still living in abject poverty. You don't just reform your taxes to better the lot of Lagos and Abuja or Kano, and then you forget Oloibiri, you forget Buguma, you forget Tombia, you forget the oil mineral producing areas under the issue of tax reforms. Now, this is an opportunity for Nigerians to let Mr. Tinubu know if we're actually practicing a democracy or a dictatorship. We will know who will own this country at the end of the day. But I assure him, if Nigerians is having a democracy, he must revisit the issue of tax reforms. He must factor in the views of the National Assembly. And then if there is dissenting voices, he must reform the tax reforms to ensure that the views of the majority of Nigerians are factored in and not just his own views simply.
You obviously watched that interview, so I want you to speak on his response to the question about fighting corruption. He was asked if it was part of his agenda, his explanation, the analysis he gave. He talked about the loan for students. He talked about some of the things he was doing. I want your answer to his response to the fight against corruption.
Well, I mean, his response was very clear. He doesn't bother about the fight against corruption. Rather, he's talking about addressing some issues, some palliatives, some student loans. Is that corruption? When you go ahead without appropriation, without a budgetary appropriation, you go ahead and give a contract of 15 trillion naira for the so-called coastal road. That is corruption. When you go ahead and purchase an aircraft for president, without budgetary, without NAS appropriation, that is corruption. The EFCC is not addressing the fundamentals of corruption. Rather, the EFCC keeps on going after youths who are using computers or laptops or whatever. The basic corruption, we see it on the street, we see it in governance, and there is no effort to confront it. Rather, Mr. President Bola Tinubu had the temerity to tell Nigerians that by giving student loans, he's addressing corruption. No, sir, he's not addressing corruption. Corruption is staring us in the face with the kind of people we see in governance. When we realize that those who now join the APC get almost a blanket check to do whatsoever, they are no longer corrupt because they have joined the ruling party. That is corruption. So by his answer, Bola Tinubu told us effectively he's not interested in fighting corruption.
Eze, thank you very much for speaking with us. I wish we had more time. Thank you, though.